In this video, we look at using spreadsheets to create random numbers. So we're going to create a list of random numbers that simulate cards from a deck of cards. So I've listed here, the first number here is going to be the suit. If we get a 1, we'll have a spade, 2 will be clubs, 3 will be hearts, 4 will be diamonds. If we get a 1, that'll be an ace. Any number from 2 to 10 will be the number from 2 to 10. 11 will be jack, 12 will be queen, and 13 will be king. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to generate a random number. To do that, we're going to click on the cell, type an equal symbol, and we'll type in rand, R-A-N-D, between, and you'll see that it comes up. I'm just going to hit enter, and the function will pop up. So I can choose a random number. This will generate a random integer between the values that I give it. I want, for a suit, I need to choose a number that's between 1 and 4. So I'm going to say 1, 4 here. So that will randomly generate a number from 1 to 4. In this case, it's a 1. So there's a suit. I'm also going to randomly generate a card number. So we have a suit. Our card is a spade so far. And we are going to generate a number or a card within the spades. So again, rand between. There are 13 cards in each suit, so I'm going to choose a random number from 1 to 13. I hit enter, and I now have 2 4s. Every time I do a calculation or a change in the spreadsheet, it actually generates new random numbers. So don't be puzzled by the fact that this was a 1 before and now it's a 4. So a 4 is a diamond. So this is the 4 of diamonds. Now if I want to copy this and make a whole bunch of random number generators, I'm just going to highlight those 2 cells. There's a little blue square in the corner. When I move my mouse over, it turns from an arrow or a hand to a crosshair. I want it to be a crosshair. I can press my mouse button and just drag down, and it will generate a list of random numbers. I'm going to go all the way to 100. I'm just dragging, still with the mouse button pressed. You can see the numbers along the side increasing, and I'm going to stop here at 100. So I've generated 100 random cards. So the first one here, 1 is a spade, and this is a 3, so this is a 3 of spades. Now you may want to take all of these numbers and have them fixed. So if you wanted to label them, so if I wanted to say, hey, this card here is the 3 of spades, as soon as I hit enter, it's actually going to generate a new list of numbers. So keeping track of these things, oh, that's interesting, that one didn't change. But keeping track of these things can be difficult. So what we're going to do instead is we're actually going to copy these 2 rows, and we'll make a copy so that they stop changing on us. So I'm just going to highlight the 2 rows, Control C to copy. And when I paste them, instead of just pasting them directly, I'm going to right-click, choose Paste Special, and I'm only going to take the values. What that does is it takes the actual numbers. It doesn't take the formulas that were in here. It takes the numbers. So these are the numbers that were there before, and you can see that they've changed since we did that. I'm going to get rid of these because we already have our random numbers. So I'm just going to highlight these 2 columns, right-click, delete columns. So now I have my 2 rows, and if I wanted to, I could say, hey, there's a 3 of clubs, and I could kind of label these cards if I wanted to. I'm not going to label all 100 of them, but just to give you a sense of what's happening here. There's a 1. The 1 is a spade, so this is the 8 of spades, and we can kind of keep going all the way down. Now, I might want to know how many spades I have in this list, and I could go through and count all of the ones. That's a very tedious process, and computers are good at that kind of thing. So let's get the computer to count the number of spades for us. So if we want a spade is a number 1, so we're looking for all of the number 1s. There's a function in spreadsheets called COUNTIF. So COUNTIF. And we are going to count if, and in order to do this, we type in the range of the numbers. So we want this column here, the E column, which is our suit. So we can do that a couple ways. I can just drag and highlight, or I could just type in from E to 100. You can see that it's actually filling in the cell there for me. with the values. So it's basically saying I'm going to look through this list and I'm going to count if I see we're looking for spades, I'm going to count if I see a 1. Spades was a 1, so if we see a 1, we're going to count it. I'm going to hit enter, and you should see there are 32 spades in this list. And you can double check by counting, but you don't necessarily have to. So we do the same thing for clubs. And rather than highlighting everything, I'm just going to copy this cell here, paste it over here, and I'm going to change it. Oh, that's not such a good idea. I need to be careful because as I copied one cell over, it went from the E column to the F column. So I'm just going to change these to E's. And I'm not looking for a 1 anymore. I'm looking for a 2 because a 2 is a club. All right, now if I want to know how many black cards there are, remember that spades are black and clubs are black. If I want to know how many black cards there are, so total number of black cards, I'm going to just, in this cell, I'm going to type in equals because that's going to give us allow us to do a calculation. And I want this number of spades, which is cell H2, plus the number of clubs, which is cell I2. Hit enter, and it returns the total. It went through and added these. I know you can add those in your head without much effort, but it's useful to have that spreadsheet there. So in total, we have 55 black cards. I had 100 cards to start with. Probability, the theoretical probability says that I probably should have had close to 50 of each. 55 is pretty close to each. 50 of each, so you can see that. So that's a nice way that we can kind of sum some totals. The other thing that's worth talking about or worth mentioning, this was for a simulation of a card game. I'm just going to slide everything over just to make some room here. That was a simulation of a card game. If you wanted to do a simulation of something else, let's say you wanted to simulate, I'll do it maybe down here, some game, maybe a lottery or something, where your chance of winning was 25%. So you have a 25% chance of winning. That means that you have a 1 in 4 chance of winning. So what we can do here is we can say, just like we did here with the aces, the different suits and the different cards, we can say here, let's let 1 be a win, 2 be a loss, and I'm trying to get 75%. So far we're at 50%. 3 would be a loss, and 4 would be a loss. Why am I stopping at 4? Well, because here, if I have a 1 in 4 chance of winning. 1 chance here wins out of 4, so my chances of winning are 1 in 4 or 25%. So now if I wanted to simulate this game that has a 75% chance of losing or 25% chance of winning, I can say, here, choose a number, rand between, and we'll choose the numbers from 1 to 4, and it's going to randomly select numbers 1 to 4. Again, I could just drag this out and get a whole bunch of them, count the number of 1s, figure it out as a percentage. In fact, that's probably worth doing. We'll call this number of wins. So the number of wins, notice here we win if we get a 1, so we want to count all the 1s. So count if this block of numbers is a 1. I only had 3 1s. Right, so that's my number of wins. If I want to know what that is as a percentage, again, we can get the spreadsheet to do a calculation. It's 3 out of the total number here. And if you know how many that is, you could type it in. Or there are some spreadsheet functions that can do that for us. My suggestion to you is just make sure you know how many there are. So for example, with the cards, we knew that there were 100. So here, I think there are 14 of them. So I'm going to say that it's 3 out of 14. That gives us a decimal equivalent, so we're just going to multiply that by 100 to get a percentage. So you can see that we're at 35%, and every time I hit enter, change the spreadsheet, it's going to change a little bit. So you can see that it varies a little bit. And we can format this. I should mention that. That's a lot of decimals to carry. We can just go up to the toolbar here and decrease the number of decimal places. However many we think is appropriate. Maybe 1 is good, so you can get a sense of what's going on. So that's how we can use a spreadsheet to simulate random numbers and the generation of random numbers and simulate games. It's great for experimental probability. So remember, with experimental probability, you have to physically do an experiment to see what comes up. So for example, we know that the theoretical probability of my fake game here is 25, of winning the fake game is 25%. We have 1 out of 4 ways to win. The experimental probability here turned out to be 21.4%, so not too far off. And again, you can just kind of keep changing if you wanted to, and seeing how close you get. Sometimes it's close, sometimes it's not. And play around with it, get a whole collection of data and see what happens to this number as you get really, really big data sets.